The humid Lagos afternoon clung to me like a second skin as I navigated the narrow streets, weaving through motorbikes and street vendors calling out their wares. My heart was full of expectation, tinged with a quiet nervousness. Today, I had decided I would find a companion, a friend who would share the quiet moments, the laughter, the solitude, the unpredictability of life. I didn't yet know who I would find. The shelter sat tucked between a low row of shops, its sign faded by the relentless sun, paint peeling in places. Even from the dusty street, I could hear the chorus of barks and meows, a chaotic but strangely comforting symphony. Pulling open the gate, the familiar scent of straw, disinfectant, and fur washed over me. It was a smell that both unsettled and soothed, a mixture of hope and neglect. I drew in a deep breath, the day suddenly more serious, more purposeful. Inside, the shelter was a maze of cages and small enclosures. Puppies tumbled over each other, noses pressed to the bars, eyes shining with excitement at the possibility of a home. I paused, taking in the scene. My attention flitted from one animal to another, but nothing caught my heart until I saw him. He sat apart from the chaos, curled on a tattered blanket in the corner of a low cage. At first glance, he seemed like just another tabby kitten, but something about him made me slow my steps. His fur was soft, striped in shades of warm brown and muted gold, but it was his face that drew me in. Small, close-set eyes, a tiny muzzle with delicate folds that gave him an expression almost too serious for his age. The other kittens tumbled and played around him, but he stayed still, observing everything with a quiet intensity. The shelter staff noticed me staring. "Ah, that one of them said, with a glance tinged in mild pity. "He's not exactly what people are looking for." "What do you mean?" I asked, stepping closer. Well, he looks angry," the woman said carefully, as if choosing her words might soften their impact. "And his eyes, they're a little closed. People think he seems off." She shrugged, as though this should explain everything. "He's been here a while. Everyone passes him by." I crouched to meet the kitten at eye level. He didn't move. He didn't hiss. He simply regarded me with a stillness that felt like recognition. His eyes, though small, seemed to hold a depth that was unusual for a kitten of his age, a quiet intelligence, a silent plea for someone to see him not as flawed, but as whole. "You're different," I whispered, reaching a tentative hand through the bars. "And I think that's perfect." The kitten tilted his head slightly, sniffing my fingers before pressing his tiny face against them. A soft, rumbling purr emanated from him, a sound so incongruous with the stern expression he wore that I felt a strange warmth in my chest. Here was a contradiction I could not resist, a warrior's visage, a poet's heart. Other visitors wandered by, some stopping to glance, others merely shaking their heads. "Too weird," one muttered. "Look at his eyes. He's not cute like the others." My heart sank for a moment, thinking of all the potential companions who would never get the chance because they didn't fit an ideal. I felt an unspoken connection, a fierce protective instinct welling up inside me. The staff brought out a small blanket, wrapping him gently. He seemed almost aware of my gaze, meeting it with what could only be described as calm dignity. I watched the folds around his muzzle, the almost imperceptible squint in his eyes, and felt my resolve harden. The world might not see him, but I did. "Can I hold him?" I asked softly. "Of course," the staff member said, smiling faintly. "But be gentle. He's special." As I cradled him, his tiny body trembling slightly against mine, I felt the softness of his fur, the rhythmic vibration of his purr. It was a grounding sound, full of trust and tentative hope. This kitten was meant to be with me. I left the shelter that day carrying the beginning of a story of acceptance, of quiet love, and of the courage to choose difference over convention. The ride home was quiet. He stayed curled in the carrier, not making a sound. It was as if he was holding his breath, waiting to see if this new chapter was real. When we arrived at my apartment, I opened the carrier door and stepped back, giving him space. He took a hesitant step out, his little nose twitching as he took in the new smells. My home, his home now. His first exploration was cautious. He moved with a low, deliberate crawl, his serious face peering around corners before committing his whole body. He sniffed the leg of my coffee table, the edge of the rug, my worn-out slippers by the door. Each new scent was a piece of a puzzle he was slowly putting together. I decided to name him Chuma, an Igbo name meaning God knows. It felt right. In a world that had judged him so quickly, his future was a beautiful unknown, a path I felt privileged to walk with him. Chuma, I said softly. He paused, his ears twitching at the sound. It was the first time I'd said his name aloud, and it felt like a promise. That first night, I expected him to hide, to find a dark corner and make it his fortress. But he surprised me. After a small meal, he padded over to the sofa where I was reading and, after a moment's thought, made a clumsy little leap onto the cushion beside me. He didn't curl up immediately. Instead, he sat there, his stern gaze fixed on my face, as if he were trying to read my intentions. Then, slowly, he laid down, his body a small, warm weight against my leg. His purr started again, a quiet rumble that filled the silence of the room. The next morning, I woke to a strange sensation. Chuma was sitting on my chest, his face just inches from mine, staring at me with that same intense, unblinking expression. It wasn't demanding or needy, just observant. It was as if he was making sure I was still there, that this wasn't all a dream. Over the next few days, his personality began to bloom. The angry face the shelter staff had mentioned was just his face. It was a mask that hid a deeply playful and curious soul. He would chase after a crumpled piece of paper with the ferocity of a tiny lion, his serious expression never changing even as his back end wiggled with excitement. He had a particular fascination with the sunbeams that streamed through my window in the late afternoon. He'd pounce on them, bat at the dust motes dancing in the light, and then look up at me with his squinted eyes as if to say, "Did you see that?" I almost caught it. His small, close-set eyes, the very feature that made others turn away, became my favorite thing about him. They were incredibly expressive if you just took the time to look. They would widen slightly with curiosity when I opened a new book, or soften when I scratched him behind the ears. One evening, I was feeling particularly overwhelmed with work. I sat on the floor, my head in my hands, just trying to breathe. Chuma, who had been sleeping on a chair across the room, got up and walked over to me. He didn't meow or demand attention. He just pressed his head firmly against my arm and started purring, that deep, rumbling sound that felt like it came from the center of the earth. It was a simple, profound gesture of comfort. In that moment, I knew I hadn't just rescued him. He was rescuing me too. He taught me that love isn't about finding something perfect. It's about seeing the beauty in the imperfections. It's about recognizing the quiet soul hiding behind a face that the world might misunderstand. His unique features weren't flaws. They were the signature of his spirit. They were the map of who he was, and I was just so lucky to be the one who got to read it. He wasn't the kitten everyone wanted, but he was the kitten I needed. Night had settled over Lagos like a velvet curtain, softening the city's usual chaos into distant hums and faint lights glimmering through the windows. Inside Adaeze's apartment, the world was quiet and still, except for the occasional rustle of brown Abyssinian, Chuma's tiny paws against the soft rug and the gentle rhythm of his purring. The first few hours had been a mixture of cautious exploration and tentative trust. Chuma had sniffed every corner of the apartment, touched every surface with delicate paws, and even dared to peek at the stack of books on the low shelf. But now, as the apartment darkened and the familiar hum of the city faded into the background, a new tension emerged: uncertainty. He was a kitten, yes, but one who had learned wariness as a survival skill. Every shadow seemed larger than it should be. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a potential threat. Chuma paused, ears twitching, eyes narrowing as he scanned the dim room. Adaeze, sensing his unease, moved closer, careful not to rush him. "It's okay," she murmured, voice low and soothing. "It's just the night. Nothing here will hurt you." Chuma lifted his small head, blinking slowly. His serious little eyes studied her, as though weighing her words. Then, inch by inch, he moved closer, eventually pressing his face into her hand. The purr that vibrated through his chest was soft but steady, a reassurance to both of them that trust, once earned, was a powerful thing. Adaeze lowered herself to the rug beside him, letting him crawl onto her lap. He was cautious, kneading the blanket as he settled, but his body gradually relaxed. She stroked the folds around his muzzle, tracing the contours of his tiny, contemplative face. Every crease, every subtle wrinkle, was a testament to his uniqueness, a silent story of survival and resilience. The city outside seemed distant now. All that mattered was the warmth between them, the quiet companionship of two beings learning to share space, trust, and heart. Adaeze marveled at how something so small could carry so much presence, so much life, so much silent communication. She spoke softly, narrating the room, describing the soft rug, the small bed in the corner, the dishes filled with water and food. Chuma listened, his ears flicking at her words, occasionally leaning into her hand or nudging her fingers with his tiny head. It was a slow dance of patience and understanding, a first night of establishing safety and belonging. As darkness deepened, Chuma began to explore a little more boldly, sniffing the edge of the sofa, investigating the folds of the blanket, and even pawing at the shadowed corners of the room. Adaeze encouraged him quietly, never forcing interaction, simply offering her presence as a constant reassurance. Eventually, he returned to the soft white blanket on her lap, curling into a tiny, perfect circle. The folds of his tiny body created patterns that mirrored the folds on his face, and his small tail tucked neatly around him. Adaeze watched him, captivated by the rhythm of his breathing, the faint rise and fall of his chest, and the small, almost imperceptible twitch of his ears. "You're safe now," she whispered. "No one will ever pass you by again. You're home, Chuma." He blinked slowly, a gesture that had come to mean more than acknowledgement. It was trust, acceptance, and the beginning of their shared language of gestures, glances, and purrs. The hours passed in this quiet companionship. Adaeze felt herself relax, letting go of the tension she hadn't realized she carried since adopting him. Here, in the soft glow of the lamp and the quiet comfort of shared presence, she understood something profound. Love was not just about joy and playfulness. Love was patience. Love was understanding. Love was seeing beauty in what others overlooked. Outside, the city pulsed with life, oblivious to the tiny miracle unfolding in the apartment. Inside, Adaeze and Chuma shared their first night, a night of tentative trust, gentle reassurance, and the delicate weaving of two hearts into one quiet rhythm. Eventually, sleep claimed them both. Chuma's small body relaxed completely, nestled into the folds of the blanket. His purrs softened to a gentle vibration, a lullaby that filled the room with warmth. Adaeze, sitting close beside him, felt a sense of fulfillment and peace she had not known before. The world outside could wait. In this moment, all that mattered was the bond they had begun to forge, a bond that would only grow stronger with each passing day. Chuma had chosen to trust her, and she had chosen to see him, not as flawed, but as perfect in his uniqueness. The first night ended not with grand gestures or dramatic events, but with quiet understanding, the kind that speaks louder than words. And as Adaeze watched him drift into sleep, she felt the promise of countless nights like this one, nights of warmth, safety, and the deep, unspoken joy of companionship. The morning sun filtered softly through the sheer curtains, casting a warm, golden glow across Adaeze's apartment. The city outside was waking, but inside, a quieter rhythm ruled. The gentle rustle of a tiny tabby kitten stretching, the soft vibration of purring, and the occasional patter of delicate paws across the rug. Chuma stirred first, blinking slowly as he assessed his surroundings. His serious little eyes, framed by the folds of his tiny muzzle, gave him the same contemplative expression that had drawn Adaeze in from the shelter. Yet beneath that solemn exterior, there was movement, curiosity, and an intelligence that soon began to reveal itself in unexpected ways. He leapt from the sofa to the rug with surprising grace, tail flicking in a controlled, almost deliberate manner. He sniffed at a small pile of toys Adaeze had arranged for him the previous evening, circling them cautiously. One by one, he began to interact with them, pawing at a soft mouse, batting a feathered toy, and even tapping gently at a ball that rolled across the floor. His movements were precise, almost calculating, as though he were testing each object to understand its purpose. Adaeze watched, fascinated. "You're a clever little one, aren't you?" she murmured, crouching to the floor to observe more closely. Chuma responded by pausing mid-swipe, tilting his head at her as if to acknowledge her comment, before returning to his exploration with renewed interest. It was during moments like this that the contrast between his appearance and his personality became most striking. His face, with its folds and narrow eyes, suggested gravity, even sternness, yet his behavior revealed mischief, curiosity, and gentle affection. He was serious in appearance, playful in spirit, a combination that made every interaction a surprise. As the morning unfolded, Chuma began to explore other corners of the apartment. He investigated the stack of books on the low shelf, pawing gently at the edges, and then leapt onto the windowsill to observe the street below. Adaeze followed him silently, careful not to interrupt his process. She realized that he was learning the layout of his new home, marking territory not out of dominance, but out of a need for understanding and safety. By mid-morning, a pattern emerged. Chuma had claimed certain spots as his own: a patch of sunlight on the rug, a corner of the sofa, the edge of the small bed she had set up for him. Each area was inspected, tested, and finally accepted. The deliberate nature of his actions spoke of intelligence and thoughtfulness, a careful approach to the world around him. Yet he was also affectionate in unexpected ways. When Adaeze paused to work at her desk, Chuma would leap onto her lap, curling into a tight circle as he pressed his face into her hands. His purrs were strong and steady, a reassurance that he was present, attentive, and aware. When she offered him a toy or a treat, his tiny gestures, gentle paw taps, a soft nuzzle, communicated a depth of feeling that words could scarcely capture. It was during one particularly quiet moment that Adaeze noticed a habit that made her smile. Chuma would approach her slowly, pause a few inches away, and blink deliberately, a slow blink that conveyed trust and affection. Then, almost as if reassured, he would lean forward, pressing his small head against her hand or arm. Each blink, each gentle nuzzle, became a ritual, a shared language between them that deepened their bond without the need for words. By afternoon, Chuma's playful side was fully on display. He chased the rolling ball with surprising speed, pounced on the dangling feather, and even attempted a careful leap onto the arm of the sofa. Each action was measured, deliberate, and precise, revealing intelligence as well as agility. Yet, even in play, there was a gentleness to him, an awareness of his small size and vulnerability. Adaeze laughed quietly at his antics, marveling at the way he combined caution, intelligence, and curiosity in every movement. "You're full of surprises," she said, reaching down to scratch behind his ears. Chuma responded with a soft, approving purr, pressing his face into her hand in a way that made her heart swell. By evening, it was clear that Chuma's personality was beginning to unfold fully. He had moved beyond tentative trust, showing not only affection but also a playful intelligence that challenged Adaeze's assumptions about his serious appearance. She realized that his unusual face had masked a rich, vibrant personality, one that demanded patience and observation to fully appreciate. As night fell and the apartment was bathed in the soft glow of lamps, Chuma returned to his favorite patch of blanket on the sofa. He curled into a perfect circle, resting his tiny head on the folds, eyes half closed in contentment. Adaeze sat beside him, brushing her fingers lightly over his back, feeling the steady rumble of his purr. "You're remarkable," she whispered. "All of you, everything about you. And I'm lucky you're mine." Chuma blinked slowly in response, a gesture that had become their silent acknowledgement, a communication of trust, comfort, and the beginning of a lifelong companionship. His playful curiosity, intelligence, and gentle affection had emerged fully, proving that appearances were only a fraction of the truth. And as Adaeze watched him settle a small, serious kitten with a heart full of life and love, she knew that every choice she had made, the decision to see beyond his appearance, to embrace difference, to commit to love, was the right one. The weekend arrived with a gentle breeze rustling through the apartment, carrying the scents of street food and blooming flowers from the nearby gardens. Adaeze had invited her friend, Amara, over for a casual visit, eager to introduce her to Chuma, though she knew the kitten's serious expression might surprise her. As soon as Amara stepped inside, Chuma stirred from his favorite spot on the sofa. He blinked slowly at the newcomer, ears twitching as he took in the unfamiliar scent. His small body was poised with caution, yet there was a subtle curiosity in the way he leaned forward, tilting his head ever so slightly. Adaeze crouched beside him, whispering reassurance. "It's okay, Chuma," she murmured. "She's a friend. You'll see." Amara froze for a brief moment when she first saw him. "Oh," she said softly, a mixture of surprise and admiration in her voice. He looked serious. Chuma's eyes, small and contemplative, met hers with a measured gaze. For a second, It seemed as though he were assessing her, judging her intentions with quiet wisdom. Then, almost imperceptibly, he lowered his head and approached cautiously, sniffing at the edge of her shoe. Adaeze smiled. Amara knelt slowly on the floor, extending a hand in a gentle gesture. Chuma paused, blinking slowly, and then pressed his face into her fingers, testing the warmth and safety of the contact. His purr began softly, vibrating against her hand. Amara's face lit up. "He's amazing," she whispered, stroking the tiny folds around his muzzle. "I've never seen a kitten act so thoughtful. It's like he's aware of everything around him." Chuma seemed to respond to the gentle attention, inching closer to Amara and eventually curling near her feet. Every movement was careful, measured, but full of quiet affection. He nudged her hand with his tiny head, his serious expression softening ever so slightly. Adaeze watched the interaction with a mix of pride and delight. Her little kitten, often misunderstood by strangers, was revealing his true nature, a heart that was sensitive, intelligent, and capable of love beyond the familiar. The morning passed with gentle play and quiet companionship. Amara offered a small toy, a feathered wand, that Chuma batted delicately, then pounced with precise timing, almost as if he were performing a carefully choreographed dance. Each leap and swipe displayed his cleverness and physical agility, while his demeanor remained calm, thoughtful, and deliberate. "You've trained him well," Amara said, laughing quietly as Chuma returned to her lap for a moment of affection before darting back to the rug. "Or maybe he's just naturally this intelligent." Adaeze shrugged, a proud smile on her face. "It's a little of both, I think. But mostly, it's his personality. He's special, not in the typical sense, but in a way that makes him unforgettable." Chuma's interactions weren't limited to play. When Amara sat quietly on the floor, he approached gently, circling her before pressing his tiny body against her legs. His purrs vibrated steadily, a small but undeniable declaration of trust. For someone new in his world, he was surprisingly open, showing that while he was cautious, he was not closed off. As the afternoon sun streamed through the windows, Chuma's confidence grew. He explored further, investigating corners of the room he had previously ignored, showing Amara the same deliberate curiosity he had displayed with Adaeze. There was no fear, only careful observation and an unspoken willingness to engage on his own terms. Watching him, Adaeze realized how far he had come. The timid, cautious kitten who had arrived at her apartment barely a few days ago had begun to navigate social interactions with sensitivity and grace. His serious expression had not disappeared. It was part of him, but it no longer misled people about the gentle, loving soul beneath. Amara finally leaned back, smiling as Chuma curled up beside her, resting his small head on her lap. "He's extraordinary," she said quietly, "and I can see why you chose him. You see the world differently, just like he does." Adaeze felt a warmth rise in her chest, a mixture of pride, relief, and gratitude. Chuma's first social encounter had been a success, and it reaffirmed something she already knew. Appearances could never define the depth of a being's heart. This small, serious-looking kitten had a personality that could touch anyone willing to be patient, observant, and open-hearted. As Amara left later that evening, Chuma followed her gaze with a slow blink, curling back into Adaeze's lap with a soft sigh. The apartment felt quieter once more, yet it was filled with the echo of trust, connection, and the joy of shared discovery. Adaeze stroked his fur, marveling at the contrast between his solemn face and the tender, playful, intelligent heart he had revealed today. For the first time, she understood the full depth of his uniqueness, not just in appearance, but in spirit. Chuma had chosen to trust someone outside of her, extending his small heart to a new friend. And in that choice, he had shown her something extraordinary. Love was not dictated by familiarity or perfection. It was built in moments of patience, respect, and understanding. As night fell, Chuma returned to his patch of blanket on the sofa, curling into a tight, serene circle. Adaeze watched him, feeling a profound sense of gratitude. He had survived judgment, uncertainty, and neglect, and yet here he was, curious, intelligent, and capable of forming bonds with those who approached him with care. But for now, in the quiet of the evening, Adaeze allowed herself to revel in this moment. Her little tabby, once overlooked, had found his first friend. The apartment was quiet that morning, sunlight streaming through the windows and illuminating Chuma's soft tabby stripes. As he stretched on the rug, tail curling in a perfect arc, Adaeze watched him with a mixture of affection and curiosity. There was something in his serious gaze, in the small folds around his muzzle, that suggested a story untold, a life before her, a world he had survived. She remembered the shelter staff speaking softly when she first adopted him, their words careful, almost reluctant. "He's different," they had said. "He's had a hard start, but he's resilient." At the time, she had been focused on the present, the trust forming between them, the soft rumble of his purr. But now, sitting quietly as he explored the apartment, she wondered what experiences had shaped him. Flashbacks, subtle and fleeting, seemed to hover in her mind. Chuma had been brought to the shelter as a tiny kitten, smaller than the others, with eyes that appeared almost too serious for his age. Staff remembered him as cautious, withdrawn, often hiding in corners while the other kittens tumbled around, chasing strings and warmth. He had survived the constant movement of other animals, the noise, the uncertainty, all without complaint, though not without fear. Many had passed him by, seeking the smooth, perfect kittens with wide, bright eyes. "He's too serious," one visitor had said. "He doesn't have the playful energy we want." Another had commented, "His face is unusual. He's not cute like the others." And so he remained, overlooked and misunderstood, day after day. Yet beneath that small, serious frame, there had been a quiet endurance, a resilience that refused to bend to judgment. He had learned to observe, to wait, to survive. And perhaps, somewhere in those silent, careful days, he had begun to understand what trust and safety might feel like, though few humans had ever offered it. Adaeze imagined those early days, the lonely nights in a cage, the soft rustle of straw under tiny paws, the distant barking of dogs, and the chorus of meows around him. She pictured him curled into himself, small eyes wary, folds of his muzzle creased in contemplation, longing for something he could not yet name, someone who would see him, all of him, without judgment. Her heart ached at the thought. It was not just the loneliness that had marked his past, but the rejection he had quietly endured. People had looked at him and seen only difference, failing to notice the tender, loving heart that beat beneath his small chest. And yet, here he was, having survived all that, still capable of trust, still capable of affection. Chuma blinked slowly at her, and she imagined him recalling those quiet, anxious moments in the shelter, the way he had waited, always watching, always cautious, until someone finally saw him for who he truly was. Now, wrapped in her arms, he had found the safety he had always longed for, the acceptance that had been denied to him for so long. The flashbacks painted a picture of patience, resilience, and silent courage. Chuma had navigated a world that demanded perfection and still preserved his heart. He had endured indifference, yet he had not hardened. He had survived neglect, yet he had not lost capacity for love. Adaeze reached out to him now, tracing her fingers over the folds of his tiny muzzle, feeling the soft fur beneath her touch. "You've been through so much," she whispered. "And yet, here you are, still trusting, still loving, still being you." Chuma pressed his small head against her hand, the familiar purr vibrating gently, and for a moment, the apartment seemed suspended in time. She realized then that every part of his past, every moment of fear, every overlooked glance, every whispered judgment, had led him here, to her. And in that realization, she felt a profound gratitude. He had survived not just the world outside, but the loneliness that comes from being unseen. And now, for the first time, he was fully seen, fully cherished, fully safe. Adaeze understood that the folds of his face, the serious gaze, the careful movements, they were not flaws, but marks of endurance, proof of a spirit that had weathered hardship and still sought connection. As the morning light deepened, Chuma began to explore the room again, more confidently now, occasionally pausing to meet her eyes, and blink slowly, a signal that trust had been earned and reciprocated. Adaeze watched, marveling at the contrast between his serious appearance and the tender, playful personality that had begun to flourish. In that quiet morning, she made a silent promise to him. No matter what, she would honor his past, nurture his present, and protect his future. She would never judge him, never expect him to be something he was not. She would see him fully as he was and love him for it. Chuma, unaware of the thoughts passing through her mind, leapt onto the sofa, curling into the familiar folds of the soft white blanket. His purr was steady, almost meditative, a rhythm that spoke of trust, contentment, and quiet joy. Adaeze sat beside him, stroking his back, feeling the warmth of his tiny body, and understood fully that their bond had been forged not in convenience or appearance, but in the profound recognition of each other's hearts. And in that moment, she knew, his past, with all its shadows and quiet sorrows, had made him who he was, a small, serious-looking kitten with a heart vast enough to fill her entire world. The days passed with a quiet rhythm, marked by the subtle milestones of Chuma's growing confidence. Each morning, Adaeze would wake to the soft hum of his purr vibrating through the apartment, a gentle reminder that he was awake, aware, and ready to begin the day on his own terms. The kitten who had once hesitated at every unfamiliar sound was now venturing further, testing boundaries, and exploring with a measured curiosity that never ceased to amaze her. A cautious paw stretched toward the edge of the rug, a tentative step onto the sofa, the faint swish of a tail as he investigated a shadow in the corner. Every action was deliberate, calculated, yet full of subtle joy. Chuma was discovering that the apartment was not a place to fear, but a space that welcomed him, a world in which he could assert himself without danger. Adaeze noticed a shift in his behavior over breakfast. He approached his dish with a sense of ownership, sniffed the food carefully, and ate with confidence rather than hesitation. Afterward, he ventured to the windowsill, peering out at the bustling street below. He was aware, observant, taking in every detail with that same serious gaze that had once seemed imposing but now felt thoughtful and deliberate. "You're growing braver," Adaeze said softly, crouching to meet his eyes. "Every day, a little more courage. You're learning that this world can be safe." Chuma responded by nuzzling her hand, a small affirmation of trust. He padded back to the rug, then circled and jumped lightly onto the low coffee table. The leap was confident, precise, and playful, a testament to his growing self-assurance. Adaeze smiled, realizing that these small victories were monumental in their significance. Each step, each exploration, was not just about physical space, but about reclaiming trust and agency. By mid-morning, Chuma had fully embraced his playful side. He chased a small ball across the rug, pounced on dangling strings, and even attempted a gentle ambush from behind the sofa. His movements were careful, yet imbued with joy. The contrast between his serious face and his playful antics was striking, and Adaeze couldn't help but laugh quietly, delighting in the unexpected bursts of energy from her small companion. She observed him closely, noticing how he began to interact with his environment in new ways. He pawed at the curtains, explored the tops of chairs, and investigated the edges of shelves, all without fear. His confidence was not reckless, but intentional, measured, a reflection of the patience and trust that had been nurtured over the past days. Later, as the afternoon sun streamed through the windows, Chuma discovered the bookshelf Adaeze had arranged with small toys and trinkets. He sniffed each object carefully, pawing at some, ignoring others, and then leaping to the windowsill to observe the street once more. Adaeze watched, fascinated by the combination of caution and curiosity that defined him. She realized that his personality was blossoming not because he was forced to be brave, but because he had chosen to explore the world on his own terms. Meals and play were no longer solitary activities. Chuma sought her out, nudging her hand when he wanted to be petted, curling against her lap during quiet moments, and sometimes simply sitting beside her while she worked. The slow blinks, the subtle head tilts, the gentle kneading of her fingers, all of these gestures communicated an intimacy that transcended words. He was not only growing confident in his space, but confident in his relationship with her. By evening, he had discovered new favorite spots: a sunlit corner of the sofa, the edge of the rug near the window, and the soft folds of the white blanket he had claimed. Each location became a personal territory, a safe haven where he could rest, observe, and play. Adaeze marveled at how he balanced caution with exploration, seriousness with play, independence with affection. As she sat on the sofa, Chuma finally leapt into her lap, curling into a small, compact circle. His serious gaze softened as he pressed his face into her hands, his purr vibrating steadily. Adaeze stroked his soft fur, reflecting on the remarkable growth she had witnessed. The once timid kitten had begun to embrace the world around him, confident in his safety and secure in her love. "You're amazing," she whispered, pressing her forehead gently against his tiny head. "Every step you take shows how strong and brave you are." Chuma blinked slowly, a gesture of trust and acknowledgement, then stretched and settled back into the folds of the blanket. Adaeze watched him, feeling a profound sense of fulfillment. He had endured so much in his early life: judgment, neglect, and uncertainty. But here he was, growing into himself, thriving in a home built on patience, understanding, and love. The night settled over the apartment, and Chuma's purrs softened as he drifted into sleep. Adaeze sat quietly beside him, marveling at the resilience of this small, serious-looking kitten with a heart far larger than anyone could have guessed. His confidence was not just a reflection of courage, but of the bond they had forged, the safety they had created together, and the deep trust that had blossomed between them. And in that quiet evening, she knew with certainty that this was only the beginning. The journey of trust, love, and discovery would continue, each day bringing new milestones, new revelations, and new joys. Chuma had survived the world once, and now he was thriving, not just surviving, but living fully, boldly, and unapologetically himself. It started with a quiet, almost imperceptible change. Chuma, normally confident and playful, was less active than usual. His little paws hesitated mid-step, his purrs were faint, and the soft amber of his eyes seemed clouded with uncertainty. Adaeze noticed immediately, her heart tightening at the subtle shift. "Chuma," she whispered, kneeling beside him on the rug. He lifted his head slightly, then rested it back down, blinking slowly but without the usual sparkle of curiosity. Adaeze's chest tightened. Something was wrong. The day had begun like any other. The sun streamed through the windows, and the apartment smelled faintly of coffee and the soft white blanket that Chuma loved. Yet, despite the familiar surroundings, he seemed withdrawn, hesitant to play with his toys, and uninterested in food. Even the small ball he had chased tirelessly the day before went ignored. Adaeze gently lifted him, feeling the slight warmth of his tiny body. "You're not feeling well, are you?" she murmured. His small head pressed against her hand, a silent plea that made her heart ache. She could see it now, the first real challenge in their life together. Without hesitation, she wrapped him in the soft white blanket and prepared for a trip to the vet. The journey was tense. Chuma, usually calm in the car, now pressed his tiny body against her hands with anxious energy. His little paws flexed against the blanket, ears twitching with every unfamiliar sound of the city. Adaeze whispered reassurance the entire way. "You're safe," she said softly. "We're going to figure this out. I've got you, little one. I've got you." At the veterinary clinic, the black woman's staff immediately took notice. Chuma's serious expression, coupled with his subtle distress, made him stand out. The vet gently examined him, checking his temperature, heartbeat, and overall health. Adaeze's stomach twisted with worry as she listened to the professional assessment. "His vitals are slightly off," the vet explained. "Could be stress, a minor infection, or a reaction to something he ate. Nothing severe, but he needs rest, hydration, and careful monitoring." Adaeze exhaled a shaky breath. Relief washed over her, but it was tempered by concern. She had known there would be challenges in adopting a kitten with such a delicate past, but seeing it manifest so clearly in this moment was startling. Back home, she created a small, quiet sanctuary for him. The sofa, now lined with his beloved blanket, became his safe space. She placed water nearby, encouraged gentle meals, and stayed close, letting him know she was there without forcing interaction. Chuma, though subdued, seemed reassured by her presence, curling into the folds of the blanket and blinking slowly at her in acknowledgement. Over the next few days, Adaeze's patience was tested. Chuma was cautious, sometimes refusing food, sometimes hiding under the sofa, and other times staring silently from the windowsill. Each moment required careful observation, gentle encouragement, and unwavering love. She adjusted her routine to accommodate his needs, spending long hours quietly reading or working nearby while he recovered at his own pace. Through it all, Chuma showed resilience. Slowly, he began to eat again, explore small parts of the apartment, and even attempt gentle play with the soft toys he had previously ignored. Each small victory was celebrated quietly. A paw stretched out to touch a ball, a tentative leap onto the rug, a slow, deliberate purr vibrating against her hand. Adaeze realized that these first challenges were not setbacks, but lessons. They reminded her of the fragility of trust, the importance of patience, and the need to honor Chuma's pace. He had survived neglect and judgment in the past. Now he was learning that he could also survive illness, discomfort, and fear with someone who truly cared by his side. One evening, after days of cautious recovery, Chuma curled into her lap, pressing his small head into her hands. His purr, once faint, had returned to its steady, comforting rhythm. Adaeze stroked his fur, marveling at his resilience. "You're so brave," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I know it's hard, but you've made it through. And I promise, I'll always be here for you." Chuma blinked slowly, pressing his face further into her hand, and for the first time since the scare, he seemed fully at peace. The challenge had tested them both, his trust, her patience, but it had also strengthened the bond between them. That night, as Chuma slept curled into the folds of his blanket, Adaeze reflected on the lessons learned. Love, she realized, was not always about playfulness or joy. Sometimes it was quiet vigilance, unwavering presence, and gentle support through moments of fear and uncertainty. And in those moments, the connection they shared deepened, proving that challenges, though difficult, could also bring growth, resilience, and a deeper understanding of each other. For the first time, Adaeze fully appreciated the strength of her little companion. Chuma's seriousness, his careful nature, his delicate heart, all of it was part of what made him extraordinary. And as she stroked his fur, feeling the soft, steady vibration of his purr, she knew that together they could face anything, illness. The mornings had taken on a gentle rhythm, soft and unhurried, as though the apartment itself had adjusted to the presence of the small tabby kitten who had once been overlooked by the world. Chuma had emerged from the first challenges of his new life with a growing sense of security, and Adaeze had discovered the quiet joy of being seen and trusted by another being so holy. Each day began with subtle rituals that neither had consciously planned, yet both had embraced. Chuma would stretch lazily on the rug, his small paws flexing against the soft fibers, before leaping gracefully onto the windowsill to watch the city awaken. Adaeze would brew her morning tea, her movements calm and deliberate, letting him observe and choose when to approach. Sometimes he would remain on the windowsill, tail flicking gently as he surveyed the streets below. Other times, he would leap to her lap, pressing his tiny head into her hands and eliciting the soft, steady purr that had become the soundtrack of their mornings. These shared routines became the foundation of their bond. There was no need for elaborate play or constant attention. It was the quiet presence, the steady companionship, and the unspoken understanding that formed the core of their relationship. Chuma had learned that Adaeze's hands brought comfort, not fear, that her voice was gentle, not threatening, and that her presence was unwavering, a constant in a world that had often seemed uncertain and harsh. Adaeze, in turn, discovered the depth of affection hidden behind his serious gaze. His expressions, once misinterpreted as stern or aloof, were now recognized as contemplative, sensitive, and full of nuanced emotion. A slow blink, a gentle nuzzle, or the deliberate placement of a tiny paw on her arm spoke volumes. He communicated not with words, but with presence, intention, and subtle gestures that required patience and attention to understand fully. Afternoons were often reserved for exploration and play. Chuma would investigate corners of the apartment that he had previously ignored, carefully stepping over rugs, inspecting stacks of books, and occasionally pawing at a dangling string or feather toy. Adaeze observed quietly, offering encouragement without interference, allowing him to assert his independence while remaining a supportive presence. Sometimes, he would pause mid-step to meet her gaze, slow blinking in a gesture of trust and acknowledgement. Adaeze would respond in kind, smiling softly and reaching out to stroke the folds around his muzzle. Each interaction was a reaffirmation of their bond, a delicate dance of trust, affection, and understanding that deepened with each passing day. Evenings were the most intimate. After a day of exploration and play, Chuma would curl into the soft folds of his white blanket, often on the sofa or in Adaeze's lap. The rhythm of his purring, now strong and steady, created a sense of calm that enveloped the apartment. Adaeze would read, work quietly, or simply sit, letting the steady warmth of his body and the gentle vibrations of his purr remind her that connection could exist in silence as profoundly as in words. Occasionally, Chuma would display unexpected bursts of playfulness, chasing a beam of sunlight across the floor, pouncing on a shadow, or batting at a feather suspended from her fingers. These moments contrasted sharply with his otherwise serious demeanor, revealing a playful intelligence and curiosity that never ceased to delight her. It was in these small contradictions that she understood the complexity of his character, a delicate balance of caution and courage, seriousness and mischief, thoughtfulness and spontaneity. There were also quiet moments of reflection. Chuma would sit beside her, head tilted slightly, observing her with his deliberate gaze as if pondering her every movement. Adaeze often found herself talking to him softly, recounting her day, sharing her thoughts, or simply commenting on the rhythm of life around them. He listened, attentive yet unintrusive, occasionally responding with a gentle nudge or a soft purr. It was during one of these evenings, as the city's lights twinkled through the window and the hum of distant traffic filled the background, that Adaeze felt the full weight of their bond. Chuma, nestled into the folds of his blanket, pressed his head into her hand, eyes half closed in contentment, purring steadily. In that simple, quiet gesture was trust, love, and an acknowledgement that their lives were now intertwined in ways deeper than words could express. "You've changed my world, little one," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Not because you've done anything extraordinary, but because you've shown me the power of patience, trust, and unconditional love. I promise to see you, always, for who you are." Chuma responded with a deliberate slow blink, a gesture that had become their silent language, a conversation without words, understood perfectly by both. In that exchange, Adaeze felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. He had taught her that love was not about perfection, outward appearances, or grand gestures. Night descended gently over the city, and the apartment grew quiet, except for the steady rhythm of Chuma's purr. Adaeze sat beside him, tracing the delicate stripes along his back and feeling the warmth of his small body against hers. The challenges of the past, the shelter, the judgment, the early cautiousness, felt like distant memories now, softened by the growing intimacy of their shared life. In the stillness of the night, Adaeze understood something profound. A bond like this, built on trust, patience, and understanding, was rare and precious. It could not be rushed or forced. It had to be nurtured, cherished, and honored every day. And in the quiet companionship of her small tabby kitten, she had found something extraordinary, a love that was gentle, unwavering, and transformative. Chuma shifted slightly, curling more tightly into her lap, his purrs resonating like a heartbeat. Adaeze smiled, pressing her forehead gently against his small head. "We're in this together," she whispered. "Always." And in that shared warmth, surrounded by the quiet of their apartment and the soft glow of evening light, the special bond between them deepened, unspoken yet unbreakable, a connection forged in patience, understanding, and the simple, profound act of seeing each other truly. The sun had barely risen when Adaeze prepared for an unusual outing, a trip to the veterinary clinic. Chuma, Abyssinian kitten, wrapped in his familiar soft white blanket, was calm in her arms, though his small paws occasionally flexed against the fabric as if testing the limits of the world beyond their apartment. Today would be a new experience, a chance to see not only the streets of Lagos, but also the reactions of strangers to a kitten unlike any they had seen. The city greeted them with its usual symphony of sounds, distant horns, the chatter of street vendors, the rhythmic hum of motorbikes weaving through traffic. Chuma blinked slowly, his serious amber eyes taking it all in. He had grown confident within the safe confines of his home, but the streets were a different world entirely, filled with unfamiliar scents, sudden movements, and unpredictable noise. "You'll be okay, little one," Adaeze whispered, her fingers tracing the folds around his muzzle. "Just stay close to me. We're exploring together." As they walked through the clinic doors, Chuma immediately drew attention. His small, serious face, the folds around his muzzle, and his close-set eyes made him unlike the other kittens in the waiting area. Some visitors stared openly, whispering to each other. "Look at that one," a woman murmured. He looks so unusual." Another added, "Why does he look like that? He seems different." Adaeze felt a familiar twinge of protectiveness but smiled gently at Chuma, who seemed unfazed by the attention. He had learned to observe carefully, to assess the intentions of others, and to trust Adaeze to shield him from harm. Still, she noticed a small furrow in his brow as he blinked slowly at the passing strangers, his little body tense yet controlled. The vet greeted them warmly, kneeling to greet Chuma with a soft voice and gentle hands. "Hello, little one," she said. "You've come a long way." Chuma sniffed cautiously, then allowed her to examine him, pressing his small head into Adaeze's hand as a gesture of reassurance. His trust in her remained unshaken, even in the unfamiliar surroundings. While the examination was routine, the reactions of others in the waiting area were a reminder of how often society judged appearances over substance. People whispered, pointed, and occasionally recoiled slightly from his serious expression. "He looks almost grouchy," one visitor commented. "Is he okay?" Adaeze smiled gently, brushing a finger along his soft fur. "He's perfect as he is," she replied softly. "Don't be fooled by his expression. He's one of the kindest, most loving kittens you'll ever meet." Chuma, sensing the tension in the room, pressed into her hand, letting out a quiet, steady purr that seemed to contradict the whispers around him. In that moment, he was both defiant and tender, a small survivor showing the world that appearance was only skin deep. After the checkup, they returned to the streets. Chuma, now safely back in his blanket cocoon, seemed more curious than wary. He leaned slightly to sniff the air, taking in the rich tapestry of scents from the city, the spicy aroma of street food, the faint perfume of flowers, the musky scent of the earth after recent rain. Adaeze watched with quiet pride as he began to explore, even in the bustling chaos of Lagos, confident in the protection and love she offered. Throughout the day, encounters with strangers continued. Some cooed and reached out to touch him, drawn by his unusual beauty and unique personality. Others hesitated, unsure how to react to a kitten who defied conventional standards of cuteness. Each reaction was an opportunity for Chuma to demonstrate his calm, thoughtful nature, and for Adaeze to witness the contrast between societal judgment and the reality of his character. Back home, after the outing, Chuma curled into his soft blanket with a contented sigh, eyes half closed in relaxation. The apartment felt familiar and safe once again, a stark contrast to the unpredictable energy of the outside world. Adaeze sat beside him, stroking his back gently. "You were amazing today," she whispered. "You faced the world, all of its noise and judgment, and you remained yourself. I'm so proud of you." Chuma blinked slowly, pressing his head into her hand. His purr was steady, a gentle affirmation that despite the world's reactions, his trust in her and his sense of security remained unshaken. Adaeze realized that these outings were more than just trips. They were lessons in resilience, trust, and the courage to be different in a world that often demanded conformity. As night fell, Chuma nestled fully into his blanket, tail curled tightly around him. The city outside faded into the background, and the apartment was filled with the quiet warmth of home. Adaeze reflected on the day, marveling at how much he had grown. The serious-looking kitten who had once been passed over at the shelter was now navigating the outside world with confidence, intelligence, and a tender heart. In that moment, she understood the depth of his uniqueness. Chuma was not just surviving. He was thriving, teaching her and anyone who met him that love, patience, and understanding could reveal beauty far beyond appearances. And as she stroked his fur and listened to the gentle vibrations of his purr, she knew that together, they could face anything the world might offer, criticism, judgment, or misunderstanding, and emerge stronger, bonded, and unwaveringly connected. Chuma had discovered the joy of small victories. Each morning, he pounced with precision on his feathered toys, mastering leaps that once seemed impossible. The little ball that had rolled past him hesitantly a week ago now became the centerpiece of playful ambushes. Adaeze laughed quietly as he leapt onto the sofa, eyes wide with concentration, tail flicking with pride at his own success. Even seemingly mundane achievements, drinking confidently from his water bowl, Exploring a new corner of the apartment or climbing onto the windowsill felt monumental to Adaeze. Each tiny accomplishment represented a breakthrough, a step away from the caution that had defined his early days, a testament to resilience, and a celebration of trust. The kitten's intelligence became more apparent. He learned routines quickly, understood gestures, and even anticipated Adaeze's movements, joining her at the kitchen counter or curling beside her during reading time. These victories, though small, became shared triumphs. Adaeze would whisper encouragement, and Chuma would respond with a slow blink, a nuzzle, or a soft purr, creating a quiet cycle of achievement and affirmation. Through these moments, Adaeze realized that growth wasn't always dramatic. Triumph could be measured in curiosity returned, playfulness regained, and trust deepened. Chuma's small victories illuminated the profound truth that patience and love foster courage, and joy could be found in the simplest of things. Life, however, was not without setbacks. One evening, Chuma became unusually quiet, hiding beneath the sofa and refusing to eat. Panic fluttered in Adaeze's chest. She monitored him, offering soft encouragement and gentle coaxing, until a visit to the vet confirmed a minor infection. Though not serious, it served as a reminder of fragility. Through the scare, Adaeze learned that love required vigilance and emotional strength. Chuma, ever resilient, allowed treatment and recovery, displaying the same quiet courage he had shown throughout his life. The experience deepened their bond. Adaeze's patience and care, combined with Chuma's trust and adaptability, reinforced the truth that challenges, though difficult, could strengthen connections rather than weaken them. As Chuma's confidence grew, Adaeze introduced him to friends and family. Many were initially taken aback by his unique expression, yet his gentle temperament and playful intelligence quickly won them over. Social interactions, shared with care and observation, became celebrations of his charm. Adaeze also shared Chuma's story online, inspiring others to embrace pets with differences. The kitten, once overlooked, became a symbol of resilience, trust, and the beauty of uniqueness. Through these connections, Adaeze discovered joy in seeing the impact of Chuma's heart on the wider world. Chuma had transformed fully. His cautious nature was replaced with confident exploration, his timid gestures now bold, playful expressions. He leapt across the room with ease, curled into Adaeze's lap with serene comfort, and displayed affection openly. Though his serious face remained, it no longer defined him. Each blink, nuzzle, and purr revealed a personality brimming with intelligence, curiosity, and tender love. Adaeze marveled at the harmony of contrast, a solemn appearance housing an exuberant heart. Life settled into a rhythm of cozy mornings, playful afternoons, and quiet evenings. Chuma became the center of joy and comfort, a steady presence that enriched Adaeze's days. Their routine, feeding, cuddling, exploring, symbolized safety, trust, and unconditional love. Each gesture reinforced their bond, and every shared moment became a reminder that home was not a place, but a feeling cultivated through care and presence. Adaeze reflected on the journey. Chuma's life had been marked by early neglect and misjudgment, yet his resilience had taught her profound lessons: acceptance beyond appearances, the quiet power of trust, and the transformative strength of love. Through him, she learned to value patience, celebrate small victories, and embrace difference with gratitude and humility. Chuma had not just changed her home, he had changed her heart. Years passed, and Chuma remained a constant, unwavering presence. He had fully integrated into life, his serious expression now a familiar and comforting feature. Friends, family, and neighbors adored him, drawn not by conventional beauty but by his intelligence, charm, and loving nature. Every morning, Adaeze would greet him with a soft touch. Every evening, he would curl into her lap, purring steadily. Their bond, tested through challenges, nurtured through patience, and celebrated in countless small triumphs, had become unbreakable. In Chuma's uniqueness, Adaeze saw a reflection of life's deeper truths: resilience, trust, and unconditional love. Together, they had forged a life that honored difference, celebrated survival, and cherished connection, forever intertwined, forever home. Every story carries a question. Tonight's is simple. If no one was watching, who would you be? Like, share, and subscribe, and tell us your thoughts in the comments. This is Tales of the Hinterland. where the quiet stories speak the loudest.